Okay, Friday, March 18th. Um, this is a day unlike any other. Lviv is no longer untouched. It's I don't want to comment any more on that until mainstream media has reported on it because it's all very new. But I'm sure it'll be all over the news soon. Other developments in Lviv, apartment prices, for rentals have just shot through the roof. I mean, it's almost like renting in New York City now. Actually, more in some cases for some types of apartments. People once were charging $20, $30 a day are now charging $200 or $300 a day. But the government made a directive that this kind of price gouging won't be tolerated, and if they find out about it, they will use your apartment to quarter troops. Of course, you'll keep the apartment. You won't lose ownership of it, but during the duration of the war, it'll become housing for soldiers. So it's probably best not to do that. I don't like renting out apartments anymore. I used to be a landlord, and it just eats your head. I mean, yeah, it earns you money, gets you ahead. It's probably one of those things you have to do in your life to establish some financial independence. But it's not easy. It's not so automatic like TV makes it out to be, dealing with people. But the other interesting news I heard too was that if you're caught drunk driving, they will take your car and give it to the army. Now, I think that's pretty cool. They should do that even on peacetime. We have, just like in America, a lot of problems with drunk drivers here. So we should probably have that law for all time, just to deal with drunk driving. It's not cool. So yeah, there's all kinds of tactical victories being reported in the Telegram feeds. Ukrainians hitting some helicopters, taking out a column here and there, but they're not really talking realistic about the strategic war. The Russians are like a bulldozer. They're just moving very slowly and systematically. They've been taking a lot of villages lately, and I think they're resupplying and going to give a second push pretty soon. And they have a massive army. Now, do I think they're going to win in the end? No, but do I think? But the real question is, where is the end? It's not, maybe it's a couple months with a negotiated settlement where they hold a gun to Ukraine's head, and Ukraine finally says, okay, we've had enough, and lose half the country or a third of the country, because there'll be a lot of civil unrest and a lot of misery and everything. I mean, that's a possibility. I mean, even the analysts are saying that's possible. Or the other one is that they run out of supplies in around 10 days' time, according to Fox News. And then they lose their position at the negotiating table. But I still see in that kind of negotiations, there'll be some loss of territory. But the Russians in Afghanistan, they pushed for 8 years in the 1980 war. In Chechnya, it was years and years. So, I mean, they work like a bulldozer. They move slow and they move for a long time. They don't care about their people. I mean, they don't care that they put their country into a recession. The only difference now is those sanctions. We haven't seen this before, Russia being sanctioned, or any country for that matter, except North Korea probably being sanctioned to this level. And North Korea just isolated themselves, but so I don't know. They could go on for a long time. They can resupply troops. They have 2 million men in the army reserves in Russia, and they still have a vast amount of military resources at their disposal. So it's a bit worrisome, like how crazy are they to just keep throwing all that into this meat grinder here? I mean, they're just getting ground up, but they would just keep coming, and wave after wave after wave. I mean, it's like in that movie 300. Eventually those 300 guys ran out of gas, and NATO is just standing by and watching. I mean, there is more talk and more favoritism to do some sort of intervention. And I don't see the risk of nuclear war for the no-fly zone, even if there is a direct air-to-air engagement. I personally think the Russian pilots would back down. they're not flying anywhere nearly as well as NATO pilots. They don't have the training or equipment or the coordination. They're not anywhere close. So I imagine they would back down. But it is needed because they're firing from behind the lines. They're firing from inside Belarus, inside Russia, into Ukraine. That's I don't know. It's not. War is never fair, but it's definitely puts Ukraine at a severe disadvantage. And that's what could go on for years. They'll just keep shooting rockets and keep attacking and just keep the country off balance and make it into an economic disaster. And so we really need the intervention. And Europe needs this because, like I said, the consequences are a little bit different than in Afghanistan or Iraq. I mean, this is on the doorstep of Europe. This is a third of the world's grain supply. And there's a huge oil reserve in the Black Sea that would give Russia tremendous amounts of influence over energy-dependent countries like India and China. And it could change the whole pole of the world. And all these Ron Paul people, it'll come on your doorstep. It will come on your doorstep. This is not Vietnam. I know this is the same propaganda they used to justify Vietnam and the Korean War, which actually was justified. If all of Korea became like North Korea, the world would have lost a lot. And probably Japan would have been a military state, and we never would have had all this comforts that we have from Japan. So there are consequences. There are wars that you have to fight because they can bite you at home. So unless we see some real change in policy in NATO, I don't know, because it's like bulldozer will just keep coming. The only optimistic wild card I see some hope in is that China says to Putin enough, because what this is doing is it's waking up the world, and China doesn't want this to. Countries have to shift their economies away from dictatorships and authoritarian governments and get rid of that dependency, and it becomes an election issue. If this keeps staying in the news cycle, I don't think the Chinese are liking this. They kind of wanted this to happen quietly so that they could keep doing what they're doing and still make money off Western nations. But now all the conversations for the next election is not going to be about going green or, putting men and women in the same bathroom or all this stuff. It's going to be about how do we secure ourselves strategically, secure our resources, and get less dependent on belligerent nations. That's going to be the topic of conversation. They do not want this. They do not want to, obviously lose all that business. The business they do with Europe and America is probably 20, 30 times more than the business they do with Russia. I mean, Russia is like around a $1 or $2 trillion economy, and the European Union is $20 trillion, and the American economy is like $20 trillion. So yeah, it's like a 20 times, probably 20x more trade, and losing, even part of that trade from America and Europe and seeing that trend down, that would be devastating for China. They actually make a lot of profit. It would be tough for America and Europe to re-gear, but eventually it'll work out in the end. It always does for democratic countries, that people are creative and ingenuity works out, and they adapt much better than people in authoritarian places, I think, in the long run. So we can only hope that China puts the pressure on, but it's looking that way. China said that they're still friends with Ukraine and they don't want to see anything bad happen to Ukraine, but then that's China. They'll say whatever, but I think this war is wearing on the Chinese. I think it's they're going to have a talking to with Putin soon. I think that's the one ray of hope I see. Like I said, there's a lot of tactical victories every day, but from the strategic side, Russia can still throw a lot into this theater. They can, it'll get ground up, but it'll take years and years, and it'll be just, it'll just destroy the economy in the process. So we really have to hope the Chinese do something, or NATO gets involved, and hopefully, and they can do it in some covert way, and then just deny everything, and that'll that'll probably be acceptable. Even the Russians would want that, that it wasn't officially done. They know they're wrong. So, Anyway, that's all I got today. I'm not going to broadcast every single day. It's just in, it's so I'll just broadcast when I have something significant to say or report on. I mean, a lot is in the news now, so I just don't want to repeat headlines. But anyway, take care.